We'd like a representative from each table. Who would like to go first? Who's ready? All right, here we go. Come on up to the podium because we're going to videotape, and that way we'll be able to share.
That's not fair.
Come on. All right, so we want to, if you folks can't see or hear very well, please let us know. Introduce yourself, please, and say your question, and then share your notes.
Yeah, I'm Laura Isaac, and I was with the group that we were tackling public art, public space in a virtual context. What are the implications? Possibly where it goes in the future, though we didn't even really have time to get into that. So we were a little bit all over the map, so if I'm a little disjointed, I'm sorry. But talking about virtual geography as very much the same as physical geography. We talked about psychogeography movement as an entry point into the virtual, like a Google search is following a path, wandering or drifting. Then we talked about flaneurs and the subjectivity of being a flaneur, but without taking the risks that you do in a physical space. So then we explored a little bit, well, the risks are different in a virtual space, that there are risks and we don't fully understand the implications of our activities or who's watching or what's happening in response to our actions that occur in this virtual space. Also along the lines of flaneury, it being a leisure class activity to be able to just go out and browse without working. Same with being able to browse in virtual spaces without working. The casual experience. Had a very good analogy that I was writing as fast as I could, but the basis of graph theory that actually came from physical experience of wanting to be able to cross the 7 bridges only once, and how it became the structure for an entire form of mathematics that actually forms the basis of the internet. And what is the border between virtual and the real physical world? Because no matter what, we're all inherently physical beings that are existing in the internet space. And I think from my scribblings, that's about all you're gonna get from me. So.
All right. I would ask whoever wants to come up, we'll just sort of line up here. It might speed things up. So Patricia's going to go next. Somebody from this table, you want to come over and be prepared? Just send your representative up. Do you want me to hold that up so you can read it? We would like you to report to the group in front of the camera.
Can the camera come over here?
Well, the camera's facing right here right now.
Well, I want to see that.
I'll hold it for you.
Well, you can stand there and it can see you. Oh, you're going to hold it for me. Okay.
I'll hold it from the
Okay,
camera. If
okay.
you don't want to be on camera.
Okay. So educational resources. We talked about at our table specifically, our interest in what we're doing, and one of the people at the table said they work at a Percent for Art program, and they don't have any way to educate people about their public art program, so they were wondering how they could use that money to create some kind of learning guide. And we talked about museums and how for exhibitions they do learning guides. We talked about action guides. I am currently working on a series of action guides that are a way to teach individuals or educational organizations, environmental organizations, how to recreate a social practice public art project, step by step. One of the ways you could do that. We also talked about the term curricula. Curricula, the word's used very loosely. It's not something that you just put together and slap into a teacher's hands. They're not going to take it and run with it. It has to be approved by the state and all that. So it's really more like a learning guide or an action guide. Common Core standards, that's the new measurement for if you're meeting all the required things that the kids are supposed to be learning. We felt that every K through 12 student should be having a much broader introduction to art than they're getting. This is all kind of obvious. Is it art? We talked about not even having that conversation when it comes to educating students about art, that that just kind of takes it off topic, if it's art or not. We talked about STEM to STEAM and adding the A. Everybody knows about that one, right? No? Oh, okay. So science, technology, engineering, and math is the new push in education right now on the Hill, and they're, the arts people are saying, wait, you forgot a letter, it's art, and it should be STEAM. So STEM to STEAM is, I don't know where it's at right now. Last year it was a big topic, so I don't know if it's died or what. And then there's other letters that people want to add to it too, of course. What was your letter that you wanted to add? Oh, okay, you don't have one. Okay, so teaching artists. This was a great one that Jack actually threw in. You know, finding ways to get funding to do a project where you have artists in residence that go into the schools. Of course, that's always going to depend on if the school wants you there, if the principal is going to let you come in and do your arts programming even though it's paid for. We talked about how parents are the best way to get through to the principals. If the parents are out there supporting, bringing you in, then that's going to be helpful. Instead of no child left behind, it should be no child left inside. I think we've heard that one. And ways that I've been nailing down how to get arts education into the children's minds and lives is through ways that the schools are already disseminating learning projects, and that is through service learning. That's a big one right now. And so that's a really good way to latch on for arts education. And also school tours. All schools get money for busing, and they're like looking, not all schools, sorry, take that back. A lot of counties, there is I mean, even in rural, poor areas, there's bus money. And that's a way you can create programs for arts, taking them to museums or whatever. So that's just one way. What else? School tours. Okay, community-based learning. We talked about place-based education, keeping it local. The Public Art Forecast has a toolkit on their website, www.forecastpublicart.org, and they have resources there for educators, for arts education. And then I also threw out the idea that how about having education be the art, like the art form, that a lot of art these days is research-based, and it's about acquiring knowledge and disseminating information. So really, like, education itself is the art, kind of a way to frame it. And who are the roadblocks to arts education? Well, administrators, and that's not new news either. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Martha, would you like?
Okay, well, I had a nice big group over there to help me wrestle with the issue of building consensus around a new icon or monument in the city, which is something my mayor is sort of charging us to do, and one of the reasons I came to this conference. One of the models that my mayor's looking at is Cloud Gate in Chicago, Millennium Park. And one of my table mates suggested that the reason why people really like it is they can see themselves in it. Of course, you can also see the city. And it becomes sort of a great photo op and so forth. And he thought that the Rocky statue in Philadelphia was maybe more of a reflection of that city. Am I correct in that? Okay. Of course, we all know we'll never reach consensus, so that's a challenge. Let's see, we talked about, is it Skopje, 2014 in Macedonia, where 40 new statues were placed, and some feel they border on Las Vegas kitsch, and so there's that problem of, are you going to create some sort of icon or representation of your city that really isn't quite very deep, and so forth. There's talk about an earthquake memorial for San Francisco, the 1989 earthquake, and how to kind of, there's a small group in San Francisco that wants to do that, but how to reach consensus more citywide. Mentioned by Todd Bressi about this new piece in Juarez, Mexico, across from El Paso, the big X, I don't know what it's called, but it's a gesture that's really an interesting sort of political and gesture. The X, Texas, was changed from the J of Tejas, and what is El Paso's response going to be to that? So that's something he's working on. Also, Louisville, Kentucky has a new public art program, and they anticipate an issue like mine in the future. And Calgary, Canada has a bridge that had 4 concrete lions based on the Trafalgar Square lions. They were in disrepair, they've been taken away, and now they're looking at how do we repurpose them perhaps, because people really like them. And so that was a discussion as well. But one person I think really kind of brought us back to a key issue, and that is, where is the discourse on the value of art and aesthetics in the city? And that maybe that should be the beginning point of any project like this, is to really get that discussion going. Nietzsche was mentioned, having that sense of critical history and what are you imposing upon your city, get people talking. The other point was made that places like Millennium Park and Trafalgar Square have a whole program around those places. They're public places that have a lot going on, not just an object. So that's another consideration that I need to present perhaps to my mayor and council, as well as the notion that an icon for the city is going to happen organically. It's not something we can force. Let's see, what else? We need to really engage the public in the process, perhaps through temporary sculpture, like they're doing at the Fourth Plinth project. Also Sculpture Chicago was a temporary art program that was mentioned, where people were able to watch artists work and demystify their process, or their process was demystified. The more aggressive and provocative our public art program can be, will prepare our city for a big project like this. Let's see, don't just consider big names. Try to nurture local artists and let them be involved in perhaps creating an iconic work. The Fourth Plinth project was discussed also a little further, where talked about how the decision-making process needs to be very clear and supported by the elected officials. Even though you have a lot of public input, you want to be sure that those who have the arts background are really making the final decisions. Look at successful models. It was suggested that artists should be asked to propose what should happen with the Calgary Lions. Another person pointed out that the St. Louis Arch was 30 years in the making, so again, we can't rush a project like this. And then a last comment was on big data, which I wasn't real familiar with, but the notion that there's so much data being collected about all of us through corporate efforts. If we had some of that data, we might get a handle on who our public was. So that's what we have.
Okay, we need more folks coming up. This table. Oh, sorry. Okay. You could keep it to about 3 minutes because we're running tight on time.
Can you hold this up for me so I can read it? Okay, my name's Liz, and I was with that group over there, and I'm going to read this question that I'm not really sure we talked about. Who do monuments or anti-monuments serve, and who are they answerable to? And one thing that you just mentioned was the icon will happen organically, and that was something that we talked about. So the question that really drew us back to was, what makes a monument anyway? And then our end conclusion was, we don't actually know. We're much more confused now than we were on Thursday. So which is, I think, a good place to be because that gives us a lot of opportunity. So this led us into this question of, is a restaurant in a community that's highly valued, is that a monument? Is a university library named after someone who has great meaning a monument? Is a monument something that represents history? Can you build a monument to a salami sandwich? There are many questions. So in some ways we talked about, is it a monument because of who makes it, because it's organic, or because it's institutionalized? Are monuments for us now, or are monuments for those who come after us, which I think many of us felt that monuments are for those who come after us. Do monuments have to have a connection to just one person? Do you have to feel an emotional response? Is it for many people, the majority of people? So there's some questions about what kind of scale does a monument have to have an impact for? And then one thing that we talked about a little bit was kind of getting at the idea that monuments are generally commissioned. So there's a group of people who are asking for this thing to be created. They bring the power, they bring the money, they have something made that doesn't necessarily make that thing unique, whereas art is a personal expression. Art can become a monument, perhaps, but that a commissioned monument has a different kind of purpose. And that in conclusion, each monument is its own thumbprint. It has its own particular space and context. It's based on the whims of the people who made it, the context that it's built in, the space that it appears in. So I think this opened up a whole lot of different questions for us, which I think maybe I've only shared a tiny sliver of, but it was a very interesting conversation.
All right. Did we miss anybody? We got your table. How about back there? Okay, both of you, come on up. It's a good thing we didn't have 12 tables. All right, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Pam Rubert. I'm from Springfield, Missouri, and our group over there, we had a great group. We had a diverse group of students, teachers, artists, public art administrator, a grant coordinator. We had docents, so we had a variety of opinions. Our question was, how do we educate the public about public art issues? And we found in our group that the diversity in our group was that some of the people came from a community that had a formal public art process, and some didn't. So that was very different approaches. And then some people said St. Louis was very divided in that there are individual communities within St. Louis that have varying programs. So addressing the question of how do we educate the public, it was interesting to hear the public art administrator from Virginia. She said, before you try to answer the questions of how do we educate and how do we install public art, we need to address the question of who. So you need to have a public master process, not a master plan, not a map of where you're putting public art or how or what you're putting in, but a process of who are the people involved and how does it work. She said, when I go to the city council, I don't want to explain the art, I want to explain the process. And then some in the group said, yes, it's good to have a process, but you want to be careful not to stifle grassroots. The other issue that came up was we had an artist that's doing public art, and she said it's very tricky for the artist to do the work because sometimes so many people get involved in the process that are not knowledgeable about art, and they maybe don't recognize the artist as a professional. And then we had a couple of university students from Washington University Sculpture Department, and they were terrific because they told us about a program at WashU where they go into the community and they do public art. And it's a nice community because the people are receptive to public art. They've seen it happen before, they're receptive to it. But it's been an educational process for them, and one of the students said, a terrific thing, and she said it's the responsibility of everybody involved in the process to make sure that the public has access to the process and also that the process has sensitivity to the community. And then we kind of all agreed in some communities where you have a public art process, it's good that there's someone there to do that, and if there isn't, then a lot of times it falls upon the responsibility of the artist. Oh, one other thing was the public art administrator said the education about the process is ongoing and it has to be a part of each project, not just a one-time thing. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more, and we're going to keep it to just 2 minutes if we can. Thanks.
Let me know when it's 2 minutes. Cool. So my name is Edward Kramarnikov, and I'm from Minneapolis. And I can tell you right away, I am not used to this heat, even though it's like 50 outside. So my question was, do memorials change over time, and if so, how? I'll go through the questions we asked. I was eating, so I didn't get all the details. But we basically just asked a series of questions. And the first one was, how do we notice memorials? Should they become ruins, and are ruins appropriate? Should they be maintained? Should we have a renewable lease in the space of memorials? And issues with changing meanings, different thresholds of lifespans, ability to experiment with materiality. How do we create different ways to engage the monument? And some people, and the comment was, some people won't recognize their surroundings without activity, which brings us to performance. So should traditional monuments become sites of performance? And adding performance instead of making new monuments. And also revisitation. We can't understand relevance if we don't revisit and reinterpret. And what if things came and went and reappeared at different times? Who decides what exists where? How do you record the relationship of the memorial within the neighborhood? And the difference between physical and ideological change. Do changes have to be physical? What should public space be like? And that led us to an exploration of how expectations and our attention span has changed over time. And are all memorials inherently temporary? And are we paying attention to the ideas of the artist? And there was an example at the end about the New York City's Vietnam Veterans Memorial and the layers of reinterpretation. And that one person saw a guerrilla play happening when she visited the memorial. And she made the comment that the space, the art, the memorial is constantly being reinterpreted. And her answer was, yes, they should change.
All right, thank you. Let's give everybody a round of applause for all the good work you did.